They always said I wouldn't make it. Not directly to my face, at least not always. But I heard it in their tone, in the pauses that hung too long after I talked about my dreams, in the way they exchanged glances over holiday dinners whenever I brought up my ideas, my plans, my refusal to settle for a predictable life. I grew up in a house where success was measured in silence. The quieter you kept your aspirations, the less they had to mock. I didn't fit that mold. By the time I was 14, I was already researching investments, coding websites, reading business books in secret while my cousins laughed about how delusional I was. I remember my aunt smirking when I said I wanted to run my own company someday. "You're not cut out for that," she'd said, sipping her wine. "People like us don't get that kind of life. You better learn to be realistic." I never forgot that line. But now, here I am, 31 years old, sitting in a Manhattan penthouse I bought in cash, sipping espresso from a machine more expensive than the car my father used to drive, and reading a message from my brother that simply says, "We need to talk. Can you help us out?" I stared at that message longer than I should have. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I'd turned off my phone for most of the day, buried in back-to-back meetings with potential investors and lawyers. My latest startup was on the verge of going public, and the money was getting so absurd that I'd stopped pretending I could even track it. And yet, that message hit me harder than any financial milestone ever had. Help them? I hadn't seen most of them in nearly 6 years. No calls. No visits. Not even a birthday text. And now, suddenly, they wanted to talk. That's when I first felt it, that slight twist in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, and tried to push the feeling away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they were just trying to reconnect. Maybe this was the apology I'd long given up hoping for. But I knew better. The last time I saw them was the night after my TED Talk went viral. I remember the way my mother called me, voice trembling, pretending she had always believed in me. I just hung up the phone, not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to say. "And now, this." I replied with a simple, "What's going on?" My brother's response came within minutes. Too fast. Like he'd been waiting, watching for my reply. "We're in a tough spot. Can we come visit you this weekend?" That's when the second sign came. He'd never asked to visit before. Never even joked about seeing my place. The idea of them being in this apartment, among the clean lines, the marble counters, the air of quiet victory I'd built, it didn't sit right with me. I imagined them walking around, touching things, laughing at the art on my walls like they used to laugh at my dreams. Still, I told him yes. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to hear them say the words they never said. We were wrong. The weekend came too quickly. They arrived at noon, all 4 of them. My parents, my brother, and my cousin Jasmine, the same cousin who once told everyone I'd end up flipping burgers. Now she wore designer heels and hugged me like we'd been close all along. "We're so proud of you," my mother said, tears already in her eyes. I should have felt something. Gratitude? Relief? But all I felt was a coldness I couldn't explain. We sat down for coffee, and that's when I noticed the first strange thing. My father kept glancing around, eyes scanning the room not like he was admiring it, but like he was measuring it. My brother kept checking his phone, typing something, then sliding it back into his pocket quickly. Jasmine avoided eye contact altogether. It was supposed to be a reunion, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like a setup. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just awkwardness or nerves. Then my mother said, "You know, you've really done well for yourself. God has truly blessed you." That's when I noticed it. The slight emphasis on blessed, like it wasn't earned, like it had been handed to me. And then she asked, "Have you thought about giving back to the family?" The air went still. There it was. Not even 15 minutes in. The reason they were really here. I smiled. Politely. But inside I was spiraling. My heart pounded harder than it should have. My brain began to dissect the entire conversation leading up to that moment. The glances. The fake laughs. The phone checks. And suddenly, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I told them I needed a minute and stepped into the hallway. My phone buzzed again. A message from a blocked number. I opened it. It read, "Watch your back. They aren't here for what you think." I froze. The hallway lights flickered for a split second. My hand trembled as I reread the message. Who sent that? And what did they mean? I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My heart was pounding now, louder than any noise in the hallway. The pristine silence of my penthouse suddenly felt hostile, like the air had shifted. Something was wrong. I read the message again. Watch your back. They aren't here for what you think. It wasn't signed. No name. No number. Just those words, cold, direct, like a warning. I stepped back into the living room, forcing a calm I didn't feel. My family was still there, sitting comfortably, sipping espresso from the cups I'd laid out. As if they belonged. As if this wasn't a performance. Jasmine was scrolling on her phone now. My brother was leaning forward, elbows on his knees like he was preparing for a negotiation. My mother smiled too widely. My father didn't even look at me. I knew them well enough to know when something was being orchestrated. I sat back down slowly. "Everything okay?" my brother asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just a quick message I had to check." I didn't tell them what it said. I didn't ask them anything. I just sat and watched. That's when my father broke his silence. "We've been thinking," he began, his voice rough with age and authority. "Maybe it's time we invested in something together. You've done well, clearly. Maybe you could help us get back on our feet. You know, as a family." The word family felt like poison on his tongue. It was the same man who once told me I was a dreamer with no grounding. The same man who didn't come to my graduation because it wasn't worth the gas money. And now here he was, dressed in borrowed confidence, pretending this was all out of love. I kept my expression still. "What kind of investment?" I asked. Jasmine perked up. "Actually, I've been thinking of launching a boutique line, high-end fashion inspired by culture, you know? But I need capital. Just a little." "You'd get equity, of course." Of course. They were selling it like a business pitch, masking desperation as opportunity. My brother chimed in, "And I've got this app idea, real potential. If we combine forces, I really think we could make something big." It was surreal. They had spent over a decade mocking me, doubting me, discarding me. And now, suddenly, they were entrepreneurs in need of an angel investor. I smiled, nodded, pretended to be intrigued. But in my mind, I was revisiting every message, every silence, every betrayal. The message I'd just received echoed louder than their voices. "They aren't here for what you think. Why now? Why all at once?" I excused myself again, this time stepping into my home office and locking the door behind me. I pulled up security footage from the building. Nothing unusual. They'd checked in like anyone else. But I noticed something. An unfamiliar man trailing a few steps behind them in the lobby, wearing a baseball cap, sunglasses, holding a laptop bag. He never looked at the camera directly. I didn't recognize him. I ran the footage back again, slower. He entered seconds after my family, paused by the lobby window, and then exited out the side door. Coincidence? Maybe. But I'd built my life on decoding patterns, reading between lines, trusting instincts when logic hesitated. And every fiber of me screamed, "This isn't normal." I returned to the living room with a fresh face. But the questions were already lined up behind my smile. "What's the urgency?" I asked casually. My brother leaned forward again. "Well, we're in a bit of trouble. Some debts. Some poor decisions. The house might go. Mom's been stressed. Jasmine's in deep with her boutique inventory. We figured, rather than asking for a handout, we'd offer you a chance to be part of something." There it was. The pitch. I nodded again. "So, this visit was about money." My mother's eyes softened. "It's about reconnecting too, baby. But yes, we hoped maybe you'd help." I leaned back, stared at the ceiling for a moment, then looked at them, one by one. "You all disappeared when I needed you. You mocked me. You doubted me. But now, when I have something to offer, you come crawling back." They went silent. It wasn't rage that filled me, it was clarity. And I needed answers. So tell me, I continued, who told you I'd say yes? Because this isn't a coincidence. Someone told you I was vulnerable, or distracted, or maybe even dying. What did you hear? Their faces froze. What are you talking about? Jasmine asked, playing confused. My brother looked genuinely startled. We just thought with all your success. No. I cut him off. Someone told you something. They exchanged glances. A quiet, panicked look passed between them. My father stood up. This was a mistake, he growled. We didn't come here to be insulted. No, I said coldly. Then what about the man who followed you into the building? Silence again. I stepped toward the hallway. You have two choices, I said without turning. Tell me everything. Or leave now and never come back. The silence that followed my ultimatum was so thick it felt like time itself paused. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was electric, taut with unspoken truths. My father looked at the others, as if seeking approval. He hadn't expected resistance. He definitely hadn't expected suspicion. He took a deep breath and sat back down, reluctantly. It was Jasmine who cracked first. She always did. Her voice trembled, not from guilt, but from being caught. We didn't mean for it to come out like this. I folded my arms. So, it was a setup? No, she said too quickly. Not exactly. We were told you were not doing well, that you were going to sell your company, that maybe you'd gotten sick, or depressed. We didn't know what to believe, but we thought. You thought you'd come take advantage while I was weak. I finished for her. She had the audacity to look wounded. It's not like that. We thought maybe you needed us, that you'd finally see we're not the enemies. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the way you saw me when I was 19? Homeless? Broke? Starving? My mother sniffled. Crocodile tears. We made mistakes. But we're still your family. Don't you think we deserve a second chance? That's when I decided to break the last thread holding their illusion together. I went to the shelf behind me and pulled out a manila envelope. Funny you say that, I said, turning back to them. Because I got this 2 weeks ago. I placed the envelope on the coffee table and opened it, revealing a series of printed emails and a copy of a private investigator's report. You all weren't the only ones digging around in my life. A PI found something interesting. Seems someone's been talking to a man named Lawrence Kincaid. My brother flinched. My father's jaw clenched. Only my mother pretended not to know the name. You know him, don't you? I said, eyes narrowing. Investor. Rival. The same man who's been trying to buy out my company for months. My brother swallowed hard. That has nothing to do with us. Oh, but it does. I leaned in. Because Lawrence has been promising certain family members a generous cut if they help push me toward an early retirement. If they help destabilize my board. If they can make me look unstable. No one's trying to hurt you, Jasmine whispered, guilt seeping through. I laughed, cold and bitter. Gaslighting me into questioning my mental state? Feeding rumors to the press? Pretending to reconnect while planning to sell me out? That's not hurting me. Their faces said it all. The plan had been real. The betrayal intentional. I knew something was off the moment you walked in here, I said, standing tall. But I wanted to see how far you'd take it, how deep you'd dig. And now I know. My mother's mask slipped. You don't understand how hard life's been for us. You have everything now while we're barely surviving. And whose fault is that? I snapped. You laughed when I told you I had a vision. You called me delusional. You said I was a burden. And now that the vision came true, you want in? My father stood, face red with rage. You think you're better than us now? I don't think it, I said. I know it, because I built something from nothing, while you all waited for me to fall. They stood there, stunned, caught. No more lies to lean on. No more manipulation to cloak their intent. And then I dropped the final bomb. I've already reported your contact with Lawrence to my legal team. There's a cease and desist order ready to go. If you even try to interfere with my company again, you'll be sued into oblivion." "You do that to your own blood?" Jasmine gasped. "I would," I said firmly. "Because family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up when you're your lowest. You all abandoned me. You chose to be strangers. And now, strangers you will remain." They stared at me, not with sadness, but with bitterness. The money, the access, the opportunity, it was all slipping from their grasp. My brother muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care. They had played their cards.
And lost.
I turned to the door. "Get out." They hesitated. I said get out. This time they moved. Slowly. Defeated. As they walked toward the elevator, my mother looked back. "You'll regret this one day." I didn't even blink. "I already regret ever letting you back in." The door closed behind them. Silence returned.
But it was peaceful now. Free.
I walked back to my office window and stared out over the skyline. Let them hate. Let them scheme. They had no power here anymore. Weeks passed. The dust had settled, but not for them. I kept tabs, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I needed to know what moves they'd make next. What I saw, though, wasn't strategic, it was desperate. The same family that tried to betray me had started to publicly unravel. My father, once the intimidating patriarch, was now caught in a lawsuit of his own. Turns out the small business he was running had been skirting taxes for years. All it took was one anonymous tip and the IRS began circling like vultures. I didn't tip them off, but karma did. My brother, the self-proclaimed entrepreneur, had his latest investment collapse. A startup he poured all his savings into turned out to be a scam. It was poetic. He tried to manipulate and scheme his way into my company, and instead got conned himself. He went from bragging about being the next big thing to sleeping on a friend's couch. Even his so-called friends were distancing themselves. That's what happens when your wealth was built on entitlement, not effort. And Jasmine, oh, Jasmine, the golden child, the one they always held above me, she got fired. Apparently, her firm didn't take too kindly to learning she'd been involved in shady dealings with one of my corporate enemies. Her name got tied to the leaked emails. Someone from inside Lawrence Kincaid's camp had flipped and exposed her. She tried to play the victim, but the internet doesn't care about crocodile tears. Her reputation?
Tarnished.
Her job?
Gone.
Her chances at getting another role in that industry?
Dead.
It was all unfolding without me lifting a finger. I simply watched. Karma was thorough, merciless, and strangely satisfying. But I wasn't just watching, I was thriving. My company had just closed the biggest deal in its history, expanding internationally. The same board members they'd tried to influence? They rallied behind me once they realized the extent of the betrayal. I stood in front of them one Monday morning, confidently laying out our 5-year plan. Let this be a reminder, I told them, that loyalty isn't just expected, it's earned. And when someone tries to poison this foundation, we remove the rot. They nodded, not just in agreement, but in respect. For the first time, they saw me not just as the founder, but as a leader who'd walked through fire and emerged sharper. Still, something gnawed at me. Not regret. Not guilt. Reflection. Karma was doing its job, but I had to decide what mine was now. One rainy afternoon, I sat in my penthouse office and received a letter. Handwritten. From my mother. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. It wasn't long. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She didn't apologize directly.
But she said she understood now.
She admitted they'd let ego and greed blind them. That when I left, they thought they were freeing themselves of a burden. But as the years passed, the burden became the pillar they'd leaned on without even knowing. She wrote, "You may never let us back in. I don't blame you. But I want you to know I see now. You rose without us, and perhaps because of us." I sat there, letter in hand, emotions mixing like oil and water. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply felt peace. Letting go had been the hardest part. But seeing them fall, not because I wanted revenge, but because the universe restores balance, proved something. You don't have to stoop low to rise above. That weekend, I attended a gala. Philanthropy. Ironically, the same thing I'd once been mocked for dreaming about, giving back. I spoke on stage, shared my story, not the bitter parts, but the rebuilding. I looked out at the crowd and realized how far I'd come. I was no longer that desperate kid outside a locked door, begging for love. I had built my own doors, my own keys, and no one could take that from me. Later that night, I walked past a familiar face. My brother. He didn't see me. He was outside, wearing a wrinkled suit, arguing on the phone.
Desperate.
Sweating in the cold.
I could have said something.
But I didn't. Karma was doing just fine without my help. Instead, I kept walking. Head high. Heart full. My past didn't define me. Their betrayal didn't break me. Karma handled what I never needed to. And that was the real victory. Months passed. The seasons changed. So did I. I wasn't just richer now. I was wiser. Stronger.
Free.
People around me noticed. Not just the ones in my circle, but even strangers, journalists, entrepreneurs, people who'd seen the viral articles and interviews. The story of the man who'd been cast aside by his own blood, only to rise, thrive, and become the one they now needed. I never asked to become a symbol, but somehow I became one. And then it happened. An invitation. A high-profile conference, one of the most prestigious events in the country. They wanted me as the keynote speaker. I laughed when I saw the venue listed. It was at the exact hotel where my parents once threw a lavish party without inviting me. I remember standing outside that ballroom all those years ago, in the cold, watching through the windows as they smiled and toasted to everything without me.
But now?
Now I'd be the one on stage, under the spotlight, while they sat in the crowd if they could afford the tickets, that is. The irony was poetic. When I arrived, suited in custom navy blue, people greeted me with admiration. There were whispers in the halls, not of scandal, but of success. He's the one. Built his empire from nothing. Turned betrayal into brilliance. I stood before hundreds, investors, CEOs, dreamers, and told my story. Not the sanitized version. The real one. I spoke about family. About betrayal. About climbing back up when no one offers you a hand. About building your own damn ladder. People cried. People stood. And when I finished, the applause didn't stop. It echoed, thunderous and proud. Later, in the VIP lounge, I saw a figure lingering by the entrance. It was my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. He didn't approach at first. Just stood there, twisting his cap in his hands, staring at the floor like a boy caught in a lie. Eventually, he walked up to me. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't start with pleasantries. He said, "We were wrong. About everything." His voice cracked. I thought money made a man. I thought loyalty meant obedience. But you showed me what real strength looks like. I didn't respond. He fumbled for words. Your mother, she's not well.
She asks about you.
Regrets everything. I looked at him. This man who once dismissed me like a stain on his sleeve was now staring at me like I was his only hope for redemption. Why now? I asked, voice steady. Why only when everything fell apart? Because I didn't know what I had until I lost it, he said. Until I saw the world admire you and realized you were everything I pretended to be. Silence. And then I said the most unexpected thing. I forgive you. His eyes welled up. But forgiveness, I continued, doesn't mean access. He nodded slowly. He understood. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your lesson. And I hope you never forget it. He thanked me. Quietly. Respectfully. And then he walked away. I thought I'd feel anger. Or satisfaction. But I just felt release. Power isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about choosing not to strike back. About knowing you could destroy someone, but deciding your peace is worth more than their pain. Later that night, as I sat in my suite overlooking the city lights, I realized how far I'd come. Not just from poverty to wealth. From irrelevance to influence. From being forgotten to becoming unignorable. I had redefined my story. The kid they laughed at. The son they excluded. The man they underestimated. Now, I was the one they admired,
Feared.
respected, and they were the ones left behind. It wasn't just a reversal of fortune.
It was a power shift.
A cosmic one. And I wasn't done. The next day, I made an announcement that shocked the industry. I was starting a new fund. Not for startups. Not for real estate. But for dreamers like me, people who'd been told they weren't enough. People who came from nothing and were surrounded by voices saying you can't. It was called Phoenix Rise. And the motto? Let them doubt you. Then let them need you. That's what power really is. Not proving them wrong, but becoming so right for the world that their wrongness no longer matters. A journalist later asked me what I'd say to my younger self. I looked at the camera and smiled. I'd say, thank them. The ones who turned away. The ones who said you'd never make it. Because they gave you the fire.
And now,
They want your warmth. And now, it's your turn. You who've listened to this story, not as a spectator, but as someone who knows the sting of betrayal, the ache of being cast aside, the burn of watching your dreams laughed at by the very people who should have believed in you. Maybe it was your family, maybe your friends, maybe your employer, your community, your lover. Maybe they looked at you and saw a shadow of who you were becoming. And instead of supporting you, they buried you. But here's the secret they never told you. Seeds grow best in the dark. What they thought was a burial was really a planting. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need your vision, your will, your fire. Because just like the man in this story, you too have a choice. You can let their rejection define you, or you can let it refine you. You can carry their judgment like chains around your neck, or you can turn them into armor. This world doesn't belong to the ones who had it easy. It belongs to the ones who were tested,
broken, ignored.
but never destroyed. You are not broken. You are becoming. So take that pain, that insult, that moment they walked away from you, and turn it into your origin story. Let them doubt you. Let them mock you. Let them leave. Because one day, when your name shines in rooms they'll never step foot in, when your voice is heard by thousands and your presence demands attention, they'll look back and realize they needed you more than you ever needed them.
So rise.
Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that they never had the power to define you in the first place.
This is your time.
Not in the future. Not when you're ready.
Now.
Because your comeback? It's not waiting to happen. It's already begun.